Gino Palazolo was never just another cast member on 90 Day Fiancé. With his signature hats, quirky charm, and devotion to Jasmine Pineda, he became a fan favorite. But behind the scenes, Gino was hiding a devastating truth, a long battle with a physical illness that no one knew about. While viewers focused on the drama of his relationship, Gino was quietly deteriorating. During this period, he divorced his wife, Jasmine Pineda, who had secretly developed a romantic relationship with Matt. She told Gino, "I will not stay with you. I am carrying Matt's child and I will only marry Matt." Hearing this, Gino broke down completely. He could never have imagined such betrayal. On October 28th, Gino suddenly fell ill and was rushed to the hospital. After tests, doctors revealed he had brain cancer. His condition worsened rapidly. He lost his memory and could no longer recognize his loved ones. As a last resort, doctors decided to perform brain surgery. Gino is currently fighting for his life in a hospital bed. From the outside, Gino seemed like a man living his dream, a quirky, soft-spoken Michigan native with a love for Panama and a heart full of hope. His relationship with Jasmine was messy, passionate, and unpredictable, the kind of drama reality TV thrives on. But what the cameras never showed was the quiet war Gino was fighting within his own body. Long before the public saw cracks in his relationship, Gino experienced strange symptoms: dizziness, disorientation, and fatigue. At first, he brushed it off as stress, the pressure of filming, and the emotional toll of his long-distance relationship. Friends noticed subtle changes. Gino, once meticulous and organized, began forgetting things, losing track of conversations, misplacing items, and sometimes staring blankly into space. Jasmine thought he was careless or inattentive, but Gino wasn't just distracted, he was scared. He didn't want to worry anyone or give Jasmine another reason to doubt him. So he kept his symptoms to himself, masking his pain with awkward smiles and nervous laughter. He would retreat to the bathroom during shoots, splash cold water on his face, and tell himself to push through. As months passed, Gino's condition worsened. Severe headaches forced him to lie down in dark rooms for hours. He wore his hats more often, partly to hide growing scalp sensitivity. He avoided social events, preferring solitude where he could collapse without judgment. Behind closed doors, Gino was unraveling. He visited doctors in secret, but tests were inconclusive. Some suggested neurological issues, others stress-related problems. Nothing provided answers. As Gino suffered in silence, his marriage with Jasmine began to crumble. Jasmine, unaware of his illness, grew distant. Their arguments became more frequent and vicious. She accused him of being emotionally unavailable, not knowing he was hiding the most terrifying truth of all. He was sick and didn't know why. In moments of solitude, Gino feared he was losing his mind and becoming a burden. He feared Jasmine would leave, but most of all, he feared the unknown. This marked the beginning of Gino's silent descent, a chapter of pain, confusion, and isolation that set the stage for what came next. While Gino quietly battled his illness, Jasmine drifted further away. Their passionate love story slowly morphed into a cold, distant partnership. Gino, weakened by illness, couldn't keep up with Jasmine's fiery, intense energy. Though he tried to send sweet texts and plan small surprises, Jasmine sensed something was wrong. To her, it felt like emotional abandonment. Their conversations grew shorter, arguments lasted longer. Jasmine began spending more time alone, going out with friends, avoiding deep talks. Gino noticed the shift, but was too weak to confront it. He feared that if he revealed his health issues, she would leave. So he stayed silent and she drifted further. One night, after a tense dinner, Jasmine said, "I don't even know who you are anymore." Her voice was hollow. Gino wanted to respond, but couldn't. His head throbbed, vision blurred. He simply nodded and went to bed. That moment marked a turning point. Jasmine began confiding in a man named Matt, someone she met through mutual friends in Miami. At first, it was casual, but soon the conversations turned intimate. Matt listened in ways Gino couldn't. He was present, attentive, emotionally available. Jasmine, starved for connection, leaned in. Gino noticed the change. Jasmine smiled more, but not at him. She dressed differently, went out more often, and guarded her phone. When Gino asked if everything was okay, Jasmine replied with a cold smile. I'm just figuring things out. That answer haunted him. Gino continued to fight his illness in silence while Jasmine grew closer to Matt. What started as friendship slowly turned into something more. Gino was left behind, not just as a husband, but as a man fighting a battle no one could see. Jasmine and Matt's relationship was intensifying. They began meeting in private coffee dates, taking long walks, and eventually spending nights together. Jasmine knew it was wrong. She knew Gino was sick, even if he hadn't told her everything. But she felt trapped in a marriage that no longer gave her joy. Matt, with his quiet strength and emotional availability, felt like an escape. One night, after a heated argument with Gino, Jasmine left the house and didn't return until morning. Gino sat alone in the dark, clutching a photo of happier times, wondering where it had all gone wrong. He didn't know that Jasmine had spent the night with Matt, crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. In interviews, Jasmine would later say, I didn't plan to fall in love with Matt. It just happened. I needed someone who made me feel alive. For Gino, those words felt like daggers. The betrayal wasn't just romantic, it was spiritual. He had given everything to Jasmine, fought for her, defended her, and sacrificed his own well-being to keep their marriage afloat. Now, as he battled an invisible illness, she had found comfort in another man. Matt remained silent publicly, but those close to him say he was deeply in love with Jasmine and willing to build a future with her no matter the cost. Jasmine was already planning her next move. The affair wasn't just a secret, it was a quiet, irreversible shift away from Gino toward a new life, a life where Gino was no longer part of the picture. It was a quiet Sunday morning when everything changed. Gino sat at the kitchen table, sipping lukewarm coffee, staring blankly at the wall. His body felt heavy, his mind foggy. The headaches had returned, sharper than ever. He hadn't slept well in days. Jasmine walked in, her face unreadable, her movements deliberate. She didn't sit or smile. She simply stood across from him and said the words that would shatter his world. I need to tell you something, she said. Gino looked up, eyes tired but searching. Jasmine took a deep breath, then spoke with calmness that felt rehearsed. I will not stay with you. I'm carrying Matt's child, and I will only marry Matt. Silence hung in the air like smoke, thick, choking, impossible to ignore. Gino blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. His heart pounded, hands trembled. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Jasmine didn't flinch or cry. She simply waited. What? What are you saying? He whispered. I'm saying it's over, she replied. I've moved on. I'm pregnant and I'm going to build a life with Matt. Gino's mind spiraled. He thought of the years they spent together, the sacrifices, the fights, the moments of joy. He thought of the nights he lay awake wondering if he was enough, the pain he had hidden, the illness he had endured alone, all to protect her from worry. And now she was leaving, replacing him. He stood up, stumbled, and grabbed the edge of the table for support. Jasmine didn't move to help. She simply watched. I gave you everything, Gino said, his voice cracking. I loved you, even when I was falling apart. I didn't ask you to fall apart, Jasmine replied coldly. I asked you to be present and you weren't. The argument escalated. Gino begged for answers. Jasmine gave none. She had made her decision and wasn't looking back. The man who had once been her husband was now a stranger. Sick, broken, and no longer part of her future. Gino collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. The pain in his skull was unbearable, the emotional devastation worse. He felt like he was drowning in betrayal, confusion, and heartbreak. Jasmine walked out, leaving him alone with the echo of her words, pregnant, Matt, marriage. It was the breaking point. Later that day, Gino called a friend, sobbing uncontrollably. She's gone, he said. She's really gone. The friend tried to console him, but Gino was inconsolable. He was not just heartbroken, he was unraveling. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the collapse of a man who had held on for too long. October 28th began like any other day, quiet, heavy, and filled with the weight of heartbreak. Gino hadn't left his house in days since Jasmine's revelation. He had barely eaten, barely slept. His body was failing, and so was his heart. That morning, he woke up with a pounding headache that made his vision blur and ears ring. He tried to stand, but his legs buckled beneath him. He crawled to the bathroom, splashed water on his face, and stared into the mirror. The man looking back was pale, sunken, and barely recognizable. "You have to hold on," he whispered. But his body had other plans. Around noon, he collapsed in his living room. No warning, no strength left. He fell hard, hitting his head on the coffee table. A neighbor heard the thud, rushed over, and found him unconscious, barely breathing. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Gino was unresponsive, pulse weak, breathing shallow. He was rushed to the nearest hospital in Michigan. Doctors immediately ran tests, CT scans, MRIs, blood work. Everything pointed to something far more serious than exhaustion or stress. The medical team stabilized him and prepared for neurological evaluation. Jasmine was notified, but she didn't come. She was already building a new life with Matt. Gino lay alone in a sterile hospital room, surrounded by machines, wires, and strangers. Doctors reviewed his scans and saw something alarming, a mass in his brain. It wasn't just swelling or a lesion. It was a tumor, and it was growing. Late that night, the diagnosis came: brain cancer. The news explained everything. His symptoms, memory loss, confusion, headaches, it all made sense now. He hadn't been falling apart emotionally. He had been physically deteriorating for months, and no one knew. The tumor was aggressive, spreading to areas affecting memory, cognition, and motor function. Doctors explained his collapse was likely triggered by a sudden spike in intracranial pressure, a dangerous event that could have killed him if help hadn't arrived. Gino regained consciousness briefly. He opened his eyes, looked around, and whispered, "Where am I?" He didn't recognize the nurse, remember the fall, or even know his own name. His memory was slipping fast. The hospital contacted his family, who arrived the next morning in shock. No one had known he was sick. He had kept it all hidden. The pain, the fear, the symptoms, until his body could no longer carry the weight. October 28th became the day everything changed. It wasn't just the collapse of a man, it was the collapse of a life. A life built on love, sacrifice, and silence. Now, Gino lay fighting for survival in a hospital bed, surrounded by machines, with a diagnosis that would alter everything. The hospital was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Nurses moved gently around him, adjusting IVs and checking vitals. But the real storm was happening behind closed doors. In the doctor's conference room, scans revealed an aggressive brain tumor near the temporal lobe, the part of the brain responsible for memory, emotion, and language. It wasn't just growth, it was grade 4 glioblastoma, one of the most lethal forms of brain cancer. It spreads quickly, resists treatment, and often leaves patients with only months to live. Gino's world had completely changed. The man who had once faced life with quiet optimism now faced a battle he could not control. Every moment in the hospital felt surreal. The machines beeped constantly, tracking his heartbeat, his breathing, his fragile life. Doctors spoke in hushed tones, using words that felt heavy and impossible to process. Tumor, glioblastoma, aggressive, inoperable. He drifted in and out of consciousness. Memories that once defined him, his childhood in Michigan, his love for Panama, the laughter and tears with Jasmine, slipped away like sand through his fingers. Nurses gently guided him, offering water, adjusting his blankets, speaking softly to keep him calm. But the real struggle wasn't physical, it was in his mind. Every time he tried to remember something, even the smallest detail, it felt like it had vanished. Faces became blurry. Names disappeared. The world he once knew was eroding around him. Gino's family stayed by his side as much as possible, watching a man they loved slowly become a shadow of himself. They could see the pain in his eyes, the confusion in his voice when he tried to speak, the trembling hands that once worked so hard to care for others. They were devastated but determined to support him, to remind him he was not alone. Meanwhile, the news of Jasmine and Matt spread quietly through their social circle. Friends and acquaintances who had once followed Gino and Jasmine's relationship on reality TV were shocked. Many didn't know about Gino's illness or the betrayal that had shattered him. Some expressed anger at Jasmine, while others quietly shook their heads, recognizing the complexity of human emotions and choices. For Gino, though, the outside world had little impact. The hospital bed, the monitors, and the constant uncertainty were all that mattered. Gino's doctors discussed treatment options. Surgery was risky, but necessary. Chemotherapy and radiation were possibilities, though each carried serious side effects. His prognosis was grim, yet there was a sliver of hope, a chance, however slim, to fight back. For the first time in months, Gino felt a flicker of determination. He had always been resilient, even when life knocked him down. Now he had to muster that strength again, not just for himself, but for those who loved him. The first surgery was scheduled quickly. The hospital staff worked tirelessly, preparing for the procedure that could save his life, or, at the very least, give him precious time. Gino's family held hands in the waiting room, a silent chain of support, praying for a miracle. He was wheeled into the operating room, the mask over his face, tubes, and monitors attached, as the reality of the situation weighed heavily on everyone present. Hours later, the surgeon emerged. The procedure had been successful in removing part of the tumor, but the battle was far from over. Gino was weak, his memory and motor skills affected, but he was alive. Doctors explained the next steps: rehabilitation, radiation, and chemotherapy. It would be a grueling journey, one that required patience, strength, and the willingness to face pain head-on. Even in the hospital, Gino tried to find moments of peace. He looked out the window at the Michigan sky, noticing the way sunlight filtered through the clouds, the subtle movements of trees swaying in the wind. Small things that he once took for granted became sources of comfort. Each breath, each heartbeat, each fleeting memory was now a gift. But the emotional wounds were far deeper than the physical ones. The betrayal by Jasmine lingered like a shadow. Memories of their past, both beautiful and painful, haunted him. The conversations, the laughter, the plans for a shared future, now gone, replaced by silence and loss. And yet, even amidst the heartbreak, there was a strange clarity. Life was fragile, fleeting, and unpredictable. Gino realized that holding onto anger or resentment would only weigh him down further. What mattered now was survival, however difficult, and the love of those still around him. Friends who visited brought small comforts, books, music, snacks, and stories from the outside world. Their presence reminded him that he was still part of a larger world, that even in the darkest moments, connection and care still existed. Every smile, every encouraging word, every hand held in support became a lifeline. Gino began rehabilitation, slowly learning to regain strength and mobility. Simple tasks, walking down the hallway, feeding himself, holding a cup of water, felt monumental. Progress was slow, but each small victory reinforced his determination. With every step, he reminded himself that he had fought through hardships before, that resilience was part of who he was. Even as he healed, the thought of Jasmine and Matt lingered, a reminder of the life he had lost. Yet Gino made a conscious choice to focus on what he could control. He could not change the past, nor could he erase the betrayal. But he could fight for his health, for his family, and for the moments of joy that remained. Support from the community also poured in. Fans of 90 Day Fiancé who had once watched his life unfold on screen reached out with messages of hope, prayers, and encouragement. Many were unaware of the full extent of his illness, but their empathy and concern reminded Gino that he mattered, that his story had touched lives in ways he had never imagined. Months passed. The treatments were brutal. Chemotherapy made him weak. Radiation caused fatigue, and recovery was painstaking. Yet Gino endured. He learned to celebrate the small victories. A day without severe headaches, a memory regained, a moment of laughter. Life had become a collection of tiny triumphs, each one a reminder that he was still here, still fighting. Through it all, Gino discovered a deeper understanding of himself. Illness had stripped away the superficial, leaving only the essence of who he was, a man capable of love, resilience, and courage. The betrayal, heartbreak, and pain could not erase the years of effort, care, and devotion he had given. They were part of his story, but they no longer defined him entirely. And while the future remained uncertain, Gino found peace in knowing he had survived the unimaginable.